Hello guys, start like that, just like that. One of the hardest things in fitness and nutrition, one of the things that most of my clients have is confront all the time, is the choosing between long-term and short-term benefits, right? Like not only that, but like the decision-making aspect of it, the most practical aspect of it, when you are debating between eating the cookies or not eating the cookies, basically. That is a very complicated thing, and one of the things that most athletes and clients will tell me is like, I know what's the right choice, why can't I make it? Why can't I reason my way into doing what I want, right? And it's a complicated problem because it feels like you have two brains. So that's the topic for today. I'm not gonna just talk about cookies, I wanna talk about decision making in general, but our examples are gonna be about mostly nutrition and fitness, because one of the cool things about nutrition and fitness is that there's a lot of transfer from there to the rest of your life, and that's always what drives my practice, right? Like I'm trying to make sure that I become interdominant, right? In the sense that my learning and my gains in one domain transfer to all the other domains, right? Especially what I learn about myself in the close controlled environment of the gym and nutrition and fitness transfer to the rest of my life. So that's what we're trying to do today. So let's get right into the peanuts of the thing. So the first thing that you should know is that the sensation of having two brains is absolutely right. There was this fantastically famous and awesome study by Cohen and McClure, 2004, to Princeton University scientists, neuroeconomists, and what they did, they did many experiments. One of the experiments that they did is they took a person, you, and imagine I'm the researcher, and what I do is I tell you like, hey, I can give you $10 today, or I could give you $11 tomorrow. Choose, what do you prefer? Most people will choose $10 today, right now. Just give me $10, it doesn't matter. Whatever, it's $1. Now, if I ask you the following, I can give you $10 in 1 year, or I can give you $11 in 1 year plus 1 day. Most people will choose the $11. Same people, right? Like, so there was a for this side of the experiment, when the reward was closer, people chose $10, but when the rewards was a little farther away, people chose the $11. And the first thing that you're probably thinking is like, well, that makes total sense. A part of you, a part of your brain is saying like, this is very intuitive, and probably the argument or the way that you will justify that sensation of feel or being very evident, because keep in mind that probably what happened to you while you were listening to me is that you felt that that it was obvious, but you couldn't explain why. The explanation is posterior, which is important. But probably the rationalization that you will come up with is saying like, well, if I have waited 1 year, what is one more day, right? And that rationalization, which feels very natural, it's posterior, because that same argument you could use it for the now. You have been waiting all your life for this $10, not knowingly. What is it one more day, right? Like so, and this is very puzzling, because if you're like completely just logic and rationally based, and these economists, Cohen and McClure, that were doing this study, think like that, from the economic terms, makes no sense that you will choose two different things there. Like assuming that you don't need the $10 today because you're dying, right? Like assuming no extreme cases, because the gain reward is the same. You have to wait one more day for $1, so they paying you $1 per day. The reward is the same here, is the same over there, so rationally you should make the same choice, but that's not what happens in real life. And my point is the fact that it feels not very natural to use telling. What they discovered, and they did different variations of this experiment, so they will give students Amazon cards and give the Amazon, let them choose between having the Amazon card here, like 1 month from now, 6 months from now, changing the numbers and so on, and they will take images of their brains working, and what they realize is that when there was a short-term reward, the part of the brain that was being activated was different than the parts of the brain, or include more parts than the parts of the brain that were activated when you were choosing long-term rewards. Right, so when you were when you were making the choice for the $11 1 year from now, that will activate, the brain will work in one way, and when you were choosing for today versus tomorrow, the brain was working a different way. That tells us like, hey, let's look at neurobiology for a second and let's understand how that process goes. Let's be a little bit more precise so that you can use it, and that's the point that I'm gonna make right now. So basic lesson on neurobiology. So the model that I'm going to be following here is MacLean's classic model of neurobiology, seen by the lens of Robert Sapolsky. I highly recommend his lesson, his whole class on behavioral anthropology, that is fully free on YouTube, and also his book Behave. But that said, the basic model of MacLean neurobiology it goes like this. So our bodies have three main neurological systems. The first one is the more ancestral one, is the one that like an ancestral in terms of evolution, that like before we were humans we developed first, and is that system that when you get really cold you shiver, right? Like it's an autonomic response. You don't think, hey, I'm cold, therefore I'm gonna shiver to create movement, to create heat. Right, like that happens to you. It's not, it doesn't go through any conscious, or there's no emotion involved, nothing. The second system is what was termed the limbic system, and is one that mediates between that and emotion. And what happens is, let's say that now you get afraid because you see an image that evokes you fear, and now you shiver. Right, and so the response there is mediated by an emotion, and an emotion understood as the signal of your body telling your a part of your brain, the limbic part of your brain, maybe not the conscious awareness part of your brain, but the limbic part of your brain saying like, hey, right now I'm scared. That's an emotion. Remember always that an emotion is not what we call a feeling. I'm feeling sad, but I mean, that's also an emotion, but it's not that simplistic. An emotion is the signal from your body saying, which contains information, imagine it as a data packet that says your body is in this particular state, in this particular configuration, right? Like think about fear when something is happening behind you and the hairs go up, that's information, right? And so, and that's the limbic system. The limbic system, think it like that. I see a picture of something that is scary and start shivering. So it's a communication between the ancestral autonomic system and emotion, right? It's mediated by emotion. And then there's the third system, the prefrontal cortex system. And by that I'm simplifying, and I'm meaning that that's the part that developed later, which is like the cognitive part of your brain. The part of your brain that can make inferences, that can make future decisions, that doesn't involve emotion and so on. And one thing that you have to understand, and this is me butchering Sapolsky, is that these systems are not, they don't work like that. They're not separated, they're not clear cut at all. That's how we have to understand them. That's how we describe them, so that like I can explain them to you in a video and I can like write a paper about it, but that's not really how they work. This is just a model, and the truth is that they're very interconnected, and they're not like, there's not a clear cut. There's a spectrum of systems working, and the picture is a little bit more complex. And it's important to keep that in mind, because when you clear borders like that, you forget what happens there in those borders, and what happens there in those borders is very important. But anyhow, so that's the basic neurobiology. And if we bring that to decision making, what's important to know is that the part of your brain that is making the short-term decision is the limbic system. That's what McClure and Cohen started discovering. That has been proven over and over. Again, it's not super clear cut, but what we know is that when you have short-term decision making, you activate the limbic system, and especially the part of your limbic system that is triggering reward systems. That's super important. because that creates a hormonal cascade different from when you're thinking a decision that is long term, and you're not gonna create that reward system. And that's why you feel like there's two parts of your brains working, because one is prefrontal cortex working and the other one is the limbic system. And actually, when you're making decisions, you have to combine both. It's not that you can channel one and not the other, which is like when people tell you like you're being emotional, as if you could not be emotional, right? Like, and so one of the things that I want you to get from this video is like they are acting together at all times, and understanding that is good because then you can work with it, right? Okay, so how do we apply this whole thing? So the first thing is that when you're doing this, when you're making decisions that involve short term versus long term, the most important aspect to realize is that what you are going to get in the short term, cut intermission. What's more important, what you realize is like, okay, so you're in that conundrum, you're filled with two parts of your brain working. What you have to realize is what is the emotional benefit of this decision. Like, make it explicit. Say that I'm gonna eat these cookies, I'm gonna feel really awesome. And you can say it, I'm gonna feel happy for 5 seconds, right? Like, and I'm gonna feel like not deprived, and again. And say it out, like think about it, like how long is this going to last, and it's gonna make me feel good. Like, you know, like when you eat cookies, it doesn't make you feel good for like 3 hours later. It makes you feel good while you do it, and it's more about like yourself allowing yourself to have it than anything else, and that's important, right? Let me give you another example. Let's say that you are lifting very heavy, and you know, a part of you knows that you shouldn't lift any heavier, your form is poor, you're not moving your best, but you really want that number, that 200 pounds or whatever. So you're making that choice. And so what's the emotional benefit there? I'm gonna feel better about myself because I got the 200 and the number, right? Like, and imagine that emotional cost. Okay, I'm gonna feel good about it. For how long? I'm gonna feel good, somewhat good, because it's still not going to be a good lift, and I'm trying to be a good lifter, and so it's just an emotional benefit that lasts a little longer, right? Like that lasts a little, but not too much. But maybe you can identify some other things, like then I can say that it's 200 and I can post it on Instagram, whatever. Identify those benefits. Don't judge them, just identify them. And then look at the rational benefits, right? Like, okay, what happens if I don't do this, right? Like, what happens if I don't, whatever, eat the cookies? I'm gonna feel a little bit deprived right now, but I'm not gonna spike my sugar. I'm gonna stay close to my goals, and so on, so forth, right? And now that you have the two things, you can actually choose, right? Like, you can actually choose between the long term and the short term, and it's totally fine to choose either, as long as you are making explicit what's the benefit, and what's important, what's crucial about that process is that because of the way the limbic system works, when you don't make explicit the emotional cost, it's not clear to you why you're choosing the cookies. And if you make it explicit, the choice is gonna be made by you with your emotions, right? Like, because you're gonna choose that dopamine shot, right? Good. One thing that you have to keep in mind is that the reward system in the body is all about anticipation. It's all about anticipation. So it's about satisfying anticipation. And if you can satisfy anticipation with more reward than you were expecting, oh man, that gets a lot more dopamine. So let's say that you're expecting a cookie is a little bit just more sweet than you were expecting. Not too much, just a little bit more sweet than you were expecting. Even better, right? Like, but it's never about the thing itself. It's about the anticipation. It's like hunger. Hunger is not about energy, it's about knowing that you're going to eat, right? That's why, for example, when you are driving home and you know you're gonna eat, you get super angry if there's traffic. You're like, get out of my way, I'm gonna eat or I'm gonna murder somebody. But same day, same situation, there's traffic, but for whatever reason you're not going to eat, you feel hungry, you're like, yeah, I'm hungry, whatever. And you don't get angry because the anticipation has been removed, right? You're not expecting the rewards. The last thing that you want to take into consideration when you're thinking about decision making or when you're actually making decisions is the following. We have a tendency to do the thing that we are not trying to do if all we're thinking is don't do that thing. So you probably are familiar with the example of don't think about a polar bear. And if I tell you don't think about a polar bear, everything that is in your head is a polar bear. So Daniel Wegner, very important Harvard University psychologist, wrote this paper called How to Say or Think Precisely the Worst Thing, or precisely the wrong thing, sorry. And it deals with about that. When you repeat to yourself, don't do something, don't say something, don't think something, the opposite happens. And the question, first the research dealt with like, is this a real thing? And proving that it was, and it totally is. And then trying to explain a little bit what is going on. The explanation part is harder to find, but we know that for sure that happens. So the worst thing that you can do if you're trying to not eat the cookies is tell yourself don't eat the cookies. If you're trying to don't call your boss the nickname that you have with your partner, the worst thing you can do is to remind yourself don't do this, don't do this. And it's not out of rebellion, it's not out of like, you know, like some people will tell you, well, don't tell me what to do because I do the opposite, right? Like, and so maybe that will apply to your own self. And that is not the case. The best way that I have found to explain this is, again, with a little bit of neurobiology, and is that when you force yourself to think about something different than that, there's a part of your brain, and usually it's the limbic system, and we're not going to go into the details of that, the emotional part, that is paying attention to that thing that you shouldn't do. When you are thinking about eating the cookies or not eating the cookies, put it somewhere. Eat the cookies now or wait for dinner, right? Like, try to avoid the no trap, because as soon as you're doing the no trap, you're going to be triggering again the limbic system a little bit there to do the opposite thing, right? Again, explaining why thinking not doing something from the neurological point of view is very complicated. However, the best way to think it is that for the brain, when you think don't think polar bear or think polar bear, it doesn't matter, because the idea of polar bear is in both. And once you invoke the idea is in your head, and in your head ideas are reality. So when you say don't eat cookies, you're basically saying, you're putting the idea of cookies in there in your brain, and you're calling the reward system, and the reward system works on anticipation. And what you're basically doing is don't anticipate and don't give the reward, right? Like, you trigger the anticipation response and then you don't give the reward, right? Versus like, I could do this now, I could get this reward here, or I can get this other reward here, right? Like, so always thinking in positive terms. What do you want to say yes to? Not what do you want to say no to. No is hard. That's why, for example, many of the work that I do with clients regarding saying no is always thinking about, like, when you say no to something, what are you saying yes to, right? Which is awesome when you have a hard time, for example, stopping work at 5, and you're like, okay, I have to say no now because I want to say yes to my kids. And the opposite is also true. If I don't say no to my work, I'm saying no to my kids. And then, you know, like, you start evaluating those decisions like that. And again, it's putting, basically what you're trying to do is taking into consideration that your brain has a reward system that rewards the emotion in the short term and rewards reason in the long term. And what you're trying to do is to make sure that you know that system and tell that system like, I got you, and this is gonna give you a reward over here, right? Like kind of like play with it. Anyhow, I hope this helps. I hope the discussion there helps. So again, when you're making that decision, take into account not just like, if I eat the cookies, I eat the cookies versus I don't. Take into account what's the emotional benefit there. Say it out loud. Know what you're gaining. What do you gain if you try to do something else, and put that something else into positive form. That is it. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please share it with your friends. Spread the love, and maybe send me a message telling me that you liked it. Leave a comment.